All right, so Dr. Robert Shug here with this week's installment of Gear, Getting Excited About Research, where we're getting you geared up for your literature review. This is Dr. Becky Nash. She's on faculty the School of Criminal Justice Criminology here at Cal State Long Beach. Dr. Becky Nash, hello.
Hello.
How
hello,
are you today?
Dr. Shug. I'm good. How are you?
Very well. Thanks for joining us on Gear today.
Thanks for having me on
Yeah,
Gear.
it's our pleasure. It's actually an honor to have you.
Thank you.
So we are actually going to talk a little bit about terrorist networks and how we map these. And this is based on a talk that you gave a couple of times, right? It was called Travel Broadens the Network, Turning Points in the Network Trajectory of an American Jihadi.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about where you've given this talk and how it's gone over.
I've given this talk twice. I given it at two conferences. One is the American Society of Criminology, and the other one was at the Western Society of Criminology.
So these are regional national conferences that
Yeah,
happen.
ASC is a national conference, and WSC is more of a regional conference for
Yeah.
the West Coast, including parts of Canada.
Okay. And how's it gone over? How's it been received?
This project has gone over better than any other project I've ever given a conference on.
Okay,
The
good.
people are very interested in network science, and they're very interested in terrorism. It's a hot spot right now.
Excellent.
Lots of questions, lots
Excellent.
of interest. So it was really great, yeah.
Great. Okay, so I guess in your talk, you sort of give the background talking about homegrown terrorism. Is that where you think is a good place to start with us kind of telling
Yeah,
us about
sure.
it? Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead.
What would you like to know?
Well, what in terms of the need for this kind of research, where did the need start? Why is it important, and where did it come from?
We have in Western countries, Canada, United States, UK, New Zealand, Australia, we have an overwhelming number of young people who are traveling from these Western countries to places like Syria and Pakistan to join groups like ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Taliban, things like that. And what we're trying to figure out is why are these kids doing it? Because research really shows that they don't come from a bad background, they come from middle class backgrounds, they come from loving families. So what is the process that's getting these kids to go join a terrorist organization?
Right, it's a very timely topic, and as of right now, I don't know when the viewers will be seeing this, but we've just had a couple of very vicious terrorist attacks abroad.
Absolutely.
And San Bernardino actually not so long
ago
ago
at
either.
all.
And I imagine, but as we move forward, that we'll be seeing this more and more. So
Absolutely.
This is definitely
Unfortunately,
very
but
unfortunately, yes, a very relevant topic, a very timely topic. So I can certainly see the importance in terms of needing to understand this very soon.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. So in terms of some of the folks that you had mentioned, we can actually put up a slide of some photos here. Can you just introduce us to these folks in the slide?
Yeah, so the slide that you'll be looking at, it's a picture of 5 different young kids. At the very left of the slide is a gal named Shannon Conley. She's from Colorado. She was from Denver, Colorado a couple of years ago. She was actually caught at the airport getting ready to leave to Syria to join ISIS, but she was captured, 19 years old. The top 2 gals at the top of the slide, that's Samra and Sabina. They were from Austria, and they actually went to Syria and joined ISIS. They posted photographs of themselves up on Facebook with holding Kalashnikovs and spouting ISIS and jihad language. And what people think now is that these 2 girls have been killed. Okay. They were 15 and 16 years old. Okay. And then the 2 gentlemen at the bottom in the car, that's Saeed and Sheriff Kouachi, who were responsible for the Charlie Hebdo attacks in France.
I mean, they all look just like happy and normal,
kids.
Right? Just like kids.
That's the reason I put these pictures up, because they're just kids that you wouldn't even look at twice if you saw them on the street.
Yeah. Okay, now your study here actually focuses on one particular guy.
Correct.
Tell us about him.
So my study that I'm looking at, we actually looked at one particular case study. His name is Omar Hamami. He was born in, oh my gosh, I can't even remember the state now.
Alabama.
Thank you. Yeah, it's not a state I think about often. So he was born in Alabama, raised in Alabama. He was raised, his mom was a Catholic. His dad was from Syria but did not practice any religion, raised in a very nice, loving, middle-class family. And he actually ended up traveling to Somalia and joined Al-Shabaab, which is a small group member of the overall Al-Qaeda.
Okay.
And he became a very high-up commander in Al-Shabaab because he could speak English and translate. He could also speak Arabic,
Right.
and then he also was very good with computers, and so they really needed his computer skills.
Right. He had a skill set that was valuable to him. And
Yeah.
so, what were the years of his operation? When was he active?
Between about 2000, I want to say 2010, 2013, but again, not a lot of people know so much information because some of the places he was at were very hard to
Okay.
get information from him, and he completely lost contact with all of his family.
Gotcha.
So he never reported back. A lot of times he's out in places where there's no communication devices at all whatsoever.
Right, but it sounds like he's an excellent example of this sort of radicalization process that
Correct.
you're talking about, and which I think is a really cool idea for a study because it's sort of like a case study, but you're applying this distinct methodology to it.
Correct.
Right.
And it absolutely is a case study because we just look at him and his life
Right.
and basically his autobiography and extract data from it to see how did he
Yeah, it's great. It's something that in
radicalized.
right, in criminology research, we are lucky to be able to do this sort of
Yes.
focused case studies
Yeah.
work. That's great.
Yes.
Okay, so tell us just briefly the radicalization process. What do you have to say about that? Why is that important to know
Well,
about here?
there's several definitions. I use one particular definition. Basically, what radicalization process is a process of committing oneself to a particular belief system and imposing that belief system on society using violent acts. And radicalization then becomes a precursor to acts of terrorism. And that's why it's important to understand this process of how people become radicalized, because if we can somehow get in the middle of that and stop radicalization, then we can hopefully stop
Makes a
terrorist
lot of
acts from
sense.
happening.
In slide 6, you talk about the 3 precursors to radicalization.
Okay, yeah, and 3 of those precursors, it's religiosity and globalization. We have reaction to foreign policy. As we know, lots of people with ISIS and Al-Qaeda and Taliban, they do not like Western ideologies, and so they have this reaction to our foreign policy. And then we have socio-political alienation. People are alienated because of their political views or their socio-political views.
Sure, okay. So then that leads us up to sort of the purpose of your study, so the research question, if you will. So what can you say about that? I mean,
The research question was literally to use social network analysis, or what we call now network science or network analysis, to map a network of this person, Omar Hamami, map his social network so we can see how he got radicalized. We're literally mapping, physically mapping his radicalization process
Yeah, okay.
through social ties and places that he went.
now you said this was a paradigm that was used by someone else previously. You said you were adapting it?
Correct.
What
So
can you
we
say about that?
used, from the literature, it's from a professor, Carlo Morselli, and he used the autobiography of Howard Marks, who was one of the largest marijuana distributors in the world.
Okay.
And he mapped several different types of networks with that autobiography data. And so what we did, we took, Omar Hamami actually published an online autobiography of his journey to jihad,
Okay.
basically.
Okay.
And we extracted data from that and mapped his social network. So the ties that he had as he's going through this radicalization process.
I think that's great. So you used a method that someone else had used in a
Yes.
totally different circumstances,
Totally different way,
person, and
yeah.
applied it to this particular research
Yeah.
problem. That's actually that's really clever. Okay, and so then what sort of data sources were you using?
Well, we used his autobiography, but I had to use a lot of other internet resources and like sources like the FBI and National Institute of Justice and just things like that to back up
Yeah.
and triangulate the information that was in the autobiography. Because an autobiography, as you know, is self-written, so he wrote it himself. So we need to back up what he wrote. Are these names that he's talking about, are these real people?
Right.
You know, are the time frames, are these the right time frames? Or even sometimes he didn't mention dates a lot, so I had to go and use other data sources to actually extract
Interesting.
dates.
Right. So a lot of reading his written work. And,
Yes.
And okay, great.
And just making sure that a lot of that was truth.
Okay.
And it turned out it was.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So then it looks like you had sort of some structured network measures. I'm on slide 11 right now that you were using. And then was this a computerized
Yeah,
mapping thing?
it's a computer program. We use, there's several out there, but for this particular study, we used what's called UCINet.
Okay.
And it's basically matrix algebra, and you put in ties via a matrix, zeros and ones.
And these are ties with other individuals?
Ties with
Okay.
social, so other individuals, but you can also do attribute data.
Oh,
And we
interesting.
used attribute data, and it can be anything from characteristics like ethnicity or gender, but we used attribute data for specific places he went, because he traveled to different countries.
Okay.
And within these different countries, he kept meeting different people.
Right.
And some people stayed with him,
Right.
some people left.
Right. And so you can see, if you look at slide number 13, and we can put this up on the screen, and we don't have to get into a complex
sure.
explanation of this, but so this was before he was in the Jihad network, and this sort of shows his associations with...
These are his friends and family ties.
Okay.
So one of the things we noticed, so he had a lot of course, this is when he was in Alabama going to high school.
Right.
So most of his social ties are friends in high school and family members.
Right.
So one of the things we noticed is that one of the people he met in high school, which his name was Bernie Culverhouse, went with him to several different places on his journey to jihad as he's becoming radicalized.
Right.
And then what happened overall is that all of the ties you see in this slide will besides Bernie,
Right.
will be gone. And
gone.
he loses complete contact and literally switches out his network
So
prior to One for New.
For example, slide 14, the next slide, you see this sort of cluster happening on the right-hand side of the screen. What's that?
Right.
Is that the new jihadi cluster? Or?
That's exactly what that
Okay.
is. That
All
is
right.
when he's in Chiamboni, which is the last place he was at before, and I didn't mention this, but he is now confirmed dead. He passed
Right.
away or he was killed by Al-Shabaab, the main people he joined,
Yeah.
in September 2013. This is the last group of people he was with. And if you see, it's a very closely,
is.
tightly network.
right.
And what's going on there is all of his ties know everybody else.
Right.
They all know him. He
Right.
knows all of them. And every single tie is either what we called a jihadi brother, so people he would fight with, or jihadi leaders, and these were leaders of Al-Shabaab.
Interesting, interesting.
And he had no other ties with any other
right.
people.
Yeah, you can see he's very isolated.
Yeah, and that's one of the keys here is the isolation.
So then help me understand in slide 15 then, why do you have this sort of split clustering then? What's the cluster on the left-hand side then?
Well, this is, so one on the left-hand side, I believe, oh my gosh, I can't see that small. I believe that's the Chiamboni.
Okay.
And on the right-hand side is Baraway. And Baraway is where, what happened to Baraway, this was a very significant action was going on here. So he's in Somalia. Baraway is a place in Somalia. He's at a training camp in Baraway.
Okay.
So he's with lots of jihadi leaders, different leaders, lots of brothers, jihadi
Right.
brothers. There was a split in Al-Shabaab.
Oh.
And so there was the traditional leaders of Al-Shabaab who
Right.
wanted to, they were more liberal, basically. And then there was a more radical group
Okay.
that really believed in jihad and against Western ideology. So he split off with them.
I see. So what this is depicting is sort of those two factions then, and how
That's
he had those
exactly
two separate
it.
networks.
Yep.
Okay, great. Wow, that's really fascinating. What are overall then? So what are the implications of this kind of study? Why is it important? What does it mean in the big picture? Do you think?
Well, first of all, if I can go back to show slide 16.
All right, okay,
One
sorry.
of the things that we found out that was very interesting, and I mentioned it as quickly earlier, is that in the beginning, so we follow his social ties throughout this process of radicalization. He starts off knowing friends and family. And if you think about the people that you know now, you probably knew them when you were a kid, and we probably have lots of close ties with our friends and family throughout our entire life.
Right.
What happened here is he literally switched as he became more radicalized. Every single friend and family that he knew
Yeah.
that had nothing to do with religious ties were completely shut out and gone, and he
And
had
traded
no
for a
contact.
new person
and
in the
traded
jihadi,
for
right.
a totally new network of his jihadi brothers and jihadi
Right,
leaders.
that's
so
fascinating.
he's completely involved in
He
that
literally
network.
swapped the network. Right.
Yeah, so that was very eye-opening for us to see.
Big
For
picture. What's it mean?
implications, we were able to identify specific turning points.
Right.
So two of the main turning points was when he traveled to Canada and he met Somali ties.
Yep.
Through those Somali ties, that got him to Somalia. And when he was in first of all, he went to Alexandria, Egypt. When he was in Egypt, he met one of the most important ties within this whole process that introduced him to Al-Shabaab.
So you're really
And that person stayed with him
You're
throughout.
identifying points in his life that he made these turns.
Exactly.
Which really kind of led to this outcome.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it just helps us identify what's going on in this radicalization process.
I was just going to say.
And how important social ties are in changing our behavior and the things we do.
Right. So how could we use this then, moving forward? Is there a use for this type of research in the future? Could we?
Well, yeah, right here. So we have what's called non-kinetic or kinetic approaches. One of the best approaches, and UK is really working on this right now for a non-kinetic approach. It's basically if you can send information through a personal network, such as propaganda, and to change people's behavior, you can do just the opposite and send opposing propaganda. And so they're working on things like that, sending information through a person's social network
Right.
to oppose this radicalized information that they're getting, say, from the internet, because we know that terrorist units use the internet a lot to recruit.
That's right.
And just hopefully having more types of programs for youth who think that they're outcast and might be willing to join a
Right.
group like ISIS
Because they're
they
targeting a
feel like,
certain type of kid, it sounds like.
I would think so. I think that the literature that I know so far isn't necessarily a specific person. I think that's one of the things from what I have researched, it's hard to actually pin down
Okay, so it could be
what
anybody.
kind of people are, except mostly youth.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so that gathering of information is that non-kinetic approach, and that's
Right.
what this is very helpful for.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Let me, if you don't mind, just in terms of, and it's a wonderful study. It's fascinating.
It's very, very fun to do.
Encourage you to continue with this work. It's great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
In terms, just more generally speaking, so for the 501 students, and getting people excited about research,
Right,
gear, right?
gear.
So you clearly have passion for this work. It comes across,
Absolutely.
and you definitely seem excited. How did you come across this topic?
Actually, this topic was given to me. I was very, very lucky. It started out as my what's it called in your dissertation when you have to do your comps? We do comps. I went to Simon Fraser University in Canada. We do comps very differently.
Okay.
We actually have to write a publishable article, and this came from that.
So this was at the suggestion of your
Of my supervisor,
That's
yeah.
great. So that's one way, I guess, of when we're struggling to come up with ideas for these things
Yeah.
for literature reviews is consulting with our faculty members and folks that are sort of doing this kind of work.
Well,
That's
this
great.
is what he did. He literally sent me the link to the published autobiography,
Right.
and he sent me Morcelli's article, and he's like, "Go with it."
Wow, that's great.
And so I came up. I mean, this is my stuff. I came up with it. I
Right.
mean, we worked together obviously after,
Right.
but I came up with all the ideas and everything.
Do you ever get stuck in the writing process?
Oh, always.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Still happens, right?
Oh, yeah.
So what do you do?
Honestly, for real, you want to know?
Is that okay? Yeah. Yeah. honestly, for reals.
A lot of times I have to put it down. I have to stop and I go do something that I enjoy. So like I will go ride bikes.
Yeah.
I'll ride my bike to one of the things I really do is I ride my bike to the airport and watch the planes take off and land.
That's so weird.
Just
I'm kidding.
to
No,
get
it's great.
it is weird. I am weird. I just have to put my brain on hold if I get stuck.
Yeah.
Because you'd be surprised how your brain is actually working in the background if you're not concentrating on that and you let it go do something else.
Yeah. Yeah. Come back
And
refreshed.
yes, and
Right.
that would help me literally every single time.
Great. That's
Yeah.
great advice.
I loved it.
Any other
So,
advice for the 501 students? And you don't have to have any.
I don't.
It's not an advice show.
Nothing that I can think of right now. If you need anything, you can email me.
Aw, Dr. Becky Nash, always available for help
Always,
and consultation.
truthfully.
All right.
Truthfully.
Well, I think that's going to wrap it up for today's episode of Gear.
All
Thank you
right.
very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. This was fun.
It was fun. We'll see
Cool.
you next time.